Hi everyone, my name is Nicole. I am a registered dietitian, and today I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about mindful eating. So, with everything going on these past few months, being in isolation, being off of our regular routines and schedules, a lot of people are finding that it's becoming a little bit difficult to stick to their typical nutrition, their usual eating habits, and that can be something that's a little bit difficult to control right now. But one thing that we often forget that we have control over as far as nutrition goes is not only what we eat, but how we eat. So taking the time to really focus on how we're eating, not being distracted, taking the time to eat more slowly so that we're really enjoying what we're eating and being conscious of what we're putting into our body. So that's what I'm going to talk to you about today is a few simple things that you can start doing at home to maybe work a little bit more on how mindful you are with your eating habits. So to get us started on mindful eating, I'm going to start with a little activity. So I'm going to get you guys to pause the video and go get 2 pieces of a certain food item that you want to do the activity with. Recommended would be dried fruit, so maybe like raisins or dates or dried apricots. A couple pieces of chocolate, if you have any, would be great. Or even like little candies, like little gummies, Welch's, if your kids have that. So I'm just gonna get you guys to get 2 pieces of that and then come back to the video. So to start the activity, what I'm gonna get you to do is to eat the first piece of whichever food that you chose to do the activity with. So you can put it in your mouth and eat it. So this activity is just to show us how we are not always extremely mindful when we're eating. We tend to be in a hurry. We're often in a rush. We're often eating while we're distracted. So either sitting, watching TV, driving, standing, just not really paying attention to what we're doing and concentrating on something else, and just getting the food in because that's what we're supposed to do and it's time to eat. So we don't really take the time to really taste everything and to smell and all of the steps that go into being a mindful eater. So now you should probably be done with your first piece of whatever food it was. So we're going to do the second piece, but we're going to do it a little bit differently. So we're going to really take our time with this piece. And I want you to really, at the end, take a few seconds to think about the difference between the first piece and the second piece that you had. So with this one, what we're going to do is you're going to take your second piece of food, and before you even eat it, you're going to really look at it. So look at that piece of food, the color, the texture, if it's shriveled, if it's got some ridges or texture or anything to it. So really look at it. Even take the time to smell it. So what does it smell like? Does it smell like something sweet? Does it bring back any kind of memories? By smelling it, do you get any kind of physical reaction? So does your mouth salivate, or does your stomach start making noises, or you feel something in your stomach? So really just take a few seconds to notice that. And then you can put the piece of food in your mouth. So don't start chewing right away. Just let it sit there. Close your eyes. Keep your eyes closed for the whole time and really start to think about everything that you're experiencing. So taste buds. So what does the food taste like? Is it sweet? Is it sour? Where are the taste buds coming from? So where on your tongue are you getting the flavors? Also thinking about the texture. So what does it feel like in between your teeth if you start to chew on it? Is it sticky? Is it melting in your mouth? Are you getting more flavor as time goes on, or are you starting to get less flavor? Do you enjoy the flavor that you're tasting? So really take your time, think about it, feel the texture, and when you're ready, you can then swallow that piece of food and really feel it go down your throat, and then notice if the taste buds, like anything changed in your mouth. Did the taste change? Does it leave you with anything good or bad? So sometimes afterwards you'll start to think, oh, that's too sweet or too fatty when it was in my mouth. I didn't really enjoy it that much when I really took the time. So food can taste differently when you're eating it really quickly and when you're taking the time to really chew it and be mindful when you're eating it. So just kind of looking at the difference between the two. This is a really great activity for kids to do as well, so they can start to really be into their taste buds and what they're tasting and feeling and the difference between different foods and really appreciating certain foods. And also, how satisfied are you? So sometimes when you really are mindful about something, you'll be satisfied after that one piece. Whereas if you would have ate it really quickly without thinking about it, you could have easily had 5, 6 pieces without really feeling that same satisfaction that you feel after the one piece. So just being a bit more mindful. And that kind of introduces us into the topic of mindful eating, because that's kind of what you might not go to that extreme with everything you're eating, but just really taking the time to taste and appreciate everything that you eat. So mindful eating, so it's really listening to your body and stopping when you're full. So being in tune with those signals that your body give you. Eating when your body tells you to eat. So stomach growling, energy levels could be an indication that it's ready to eat, you're hungry. Also eating nutritious foods that make you feel good. So oftentimes we think we want junk food, or we think we want something that's not as good for us. But when you're really mindful and you really tune into what your body actually wants, more often than not, your body is really wanting nutritious foods that are going to make you feel good, that you're going to feel good after the meal. It might just be more your emotions or your mind that are wanting something else. So being mindful is also paying attention to what your body actually truly wants and not just your mind. And focusing on eating only, so no distractions, so not eating with the TV while driving, all of these other things. So just focusing on what you're eating only. And not being judgmental. So sometimes when we eat something, if we think that it's not as healthy, we have some kind of judgment or guilt while we're eating it. And that's going to ruin your experience with that food. You're not going to enjoy it as much. So if you really take the time to let go of that judgment, let go of the guilt, and just decide that that's what you wanted in that moment, you made that choice, and you really just pay attention to enjoying it, that's what being mindful is all about. And you'll often find that after just a little bit of that food, you're completely satisfied and you can stop. So it can help to prevent some of the binges or overeating that tends to happen with foods that we tend to be more judgmental towards. So the opposite of that would be mindless eating. There's a lot of that going on right now due to being in isolation, being more bored, maybe having more free time, especially kids. A lot of kids are a little bit more bored right now, and they tend to think that they're hungry more often just because they're trying to find something to do. So the same goes for adults though. So mindless eating is eating past full, so you're full but you keep going, or ignoring your body's signals. So you eat when you're not really hungry, you eat more than your body actually wants to, so you ignore that I'm full feeling and you keep going. Eating when your emotions tells you to eat, and eating foods that are emotionally comforting rather than physically comforting. Eating while multitasking, so while you're working, while you're driving, while you're cooking supper, watching TV, all of these things on your phone even. So thinking of how you're eating and having judgment or guilt around certain foods. So it's just the complete opposite, basically. So these are just some pictures of some examples of mindless eating. So we see in front of screens, various types of screens, on the phone, eating while driving. So we're distracted. We're thinking about the driving more so than the actual food that we're eating, which will tend to make us eat faster as well. Eating while working, so we're eating in a typically stressful environment, or where we're really busy, so that's actually going to impact our digestion. So we don't digest as well if we're stressed or eating in a rush, and eating while reading or other things like that. So this is just a little example of mindful eating. So we often focus on the middle of the picture, so what our meal looks like. So trying to eat healthy, getting all the components of a balanced meal, which is really important in order to feel full and to eat a healthy meal. However, everything that surrounds that is just as important, and it's things that we tend to forget to concentrate on, which we really should, and right now is a good time to do that. So taking smaller bites, putting the fork down in between bites, taking a breath. I'm going to talk about that. Sitting at a table, eating on a plate rather than just from the container or the box or the bag. Ignoring health claims, so not eating foods just because it says fat-free or sugar-free or any of these health claims that you see on there, but actually eating foods that you enjoy and will satisfy you. Chewing more. Eat with your non-dominant hand. I'll talk about that later as well. Share a meal with your family or friends when you can, just for a better experience, and really close your eyes like we did in the example and savor the food so you really enjoy it. So I have a few tips for you. We're going to go through them, and just these are tips on how to things that you can start doing to become a more mindful eater. So first one is observe your habits. So keeping a food journal is a really good thing to do, especially if you're unsure of your habits or you find that you've been snacking a lot more, or eating mindlessly, and you're not really sure how many meals or snacks you're having in the day, if you're really hungry or why you're hungry in between meals. Is it just boredom or is it physical? So just keeping a food journal, what you ate, where and when. So how were you distracted? Were you actually mindful? And that brings us to hunger in between meals. So if you find that you're hungry in between meals, is it because you're actually hungry? If that's the case, is it normal for you, or is it because you didn't eat as much earlier in the day, you skipped meals? Or is it because your meal was not well balanced or you weren't really satisfied, so maybe you didn't eat enough? And then the same goes for the other hand. So maybe you're not feeling hungry in between meals where you would usually have a snack, and that may be because you're more stressed or busy with work and kids and everything going on, but your body actually is hungry. You're just not paying attention to it. You're shutting down, or you're not paying attention to the signals. Or maybe it's because you had a meal that was a little bit too big at the meal before, and now it should be time to eat, but you're just not hungry. So just paying attention to that. Your snacking habits and your cravings. So what's going on that side? Are you snacking a lot more than usual? What are you snacking on? When? What kind of cravings you're having? Those types of things can be in your journal. And then hunger fullness scale, which I'll talk about. And then staying aware of how foods make you feel instead of eating things based on good or bad foods. So what I mean by that is just if you have a certain food or a certain meal and you notice that usually that meal keeps you full for 3 hours, but that day it was only 1 hour after you were hungry, maybe it wasn't the right balance of foods or the right amount of food. So just being conscious of that, just because things are sometimes labeled as healthy, but they might not be the best food for you. You might not digest them well. They might not fill you up. So even though they're healthy, they might not be the best choice. Tip number 2 would be to care for your environment. So focus on the actual food you're eating. Again, no multitasking, so no doing other things. Clean, decluttered food environment. So trying to keep your kitchen and your dining table clean so that you can actually eat there and prepare foods without feeling stress and overwhelmed and the chaos that comes from a cluttered environment. Sit down. So actually take the time to sit down at a table, at a desk, somewhere where you're supposed to eat food, and focusing just on the food again. Choose simple meals when you're busy. So sometimes the stress of the meal preparation will bring us into stress when we're eating, which means eating faster, not digesting as well, and then dealing with some issues of being too full or having digestive issues, things like that. So when you're busy, just try to choose simple meals or having some ingredients prepped in advance so that there's less stress when it comes to meal preparation. which can make just the whole eating experience better. And replace TV noise. So if you tend to have the TV on in the background, maybe turn it off when it's mealtime and just replace it with a soft music or silence, just taking that noise out of there and something just more pleasant. Tip number 3 is the hunger fullness scale. So this is just a scale for you to assess where your hunger level or your fullness level is. So 1 is basically you're way too hungry, so you let it go way too long to the point where you're dizzy, nauseous, you're shaky. Up until 10 where you're just extremely full. I think everybody's been there at some point, but you just had way too much food. You have to unbutton your pants. You're not feeling good at all. You might even be sick because you ate too much. So those are the 2 extremes. Obviously, we want to be there as little as possible, and we want to spend as much time as possible in the middle. So kind of staying in between a 3 and a 6. A 3 is a growling stomach. A 6 is a satisfied. And then in between that would be first signs of hunger and physically full. So when it's a 3-4, so first sign of hunger to growling stomach, that's when you should tell yourself it's time to eat, have a snack or a meal, even if you're not, it's not planned time to eat. So if you follow kind of a meal plan or something like that, it's not time to eat, your body is telling you that it's time to eat. So just journal about it and why, and have some food and move on. Might be because your previous meal wasn't big enough, or other reasons. 5 or 6, physically full to satisfied, is where you want to be after a meal. So you're just feeling good, you're satisfied, you're not too full, but you're going to be full for a couple hours before it's time to eat again. So you want to try to stay in between that. Tip number 4 would be eating slower. So this is a really big one. Most of us are very fast eaters. We often notice that when kids are eating, they're really slow eaters, a lot of them, because they haven't been conditioned to eat faster. It's usually because we're busy, we're stressed, we have to eat as fast as possible so we can move on to the next thing on the to-do list or the next task. And so just taking a little bit more time to eat a little bit slower. So a few things you can do to help with that would be take a few minutes to breathe before a meal. So just take a few seconds, take a couple breaths, close your eyes, just to calm down a little bit. Because if you were just working or you were doing something stressful and then you start eating right away, you're going to tend to eat a little bit faster, you're tense, you're on edge, and you're just going to eat more quickly, which will lead to eating more. Look and smell your food. So take a couple seconds. We eat with our eyes, we eat with our smell, so our nose. What your food looks like and smells like is going to impact your experience of eating the food. So take a couple seconds to get the full experience and enjoy the food fully. Chew more before swallowing. So we should actually chew 20 to 30 times each bite. It might sound like a lot, and when you try it, it's like it lasts forever, but just kind of being conscious of how many times you're chewing. So if you only chew 3 times and you swallow, obviously you're not going to digest it as well. So just trying to extend that to maybe 10 to 15 times before you swallow the food. What that does is the digestion actually starts in our mouth. So when we're chewing the food, we're mixing the food with some digestive enzymes, saliva, things like that, so that our stomach can have an easier time of digesting everything and sending it into the digestive tract. So if we don't chew, we're actually taking that part out of our digestive process, which means when it goes into the stomach, it's not how it should be. So it's going to affect how we digest it. So just taking the time to chew more, which also means slowing down and enjoying your food a little bit more. Eat with your opposite hand or using different utensils. So eating with the opposite hand, obviously more difficult and awkward, which means it's going to take more time. Or using different utensils. So for example, chopsticks, if you're doing noodles, that will slow you down. Using a fork when you should be using a spoon or vice versa. Just playing around with your utensils. Or even smaller utensils. So if you have smaller forks, smaller spoon, you're going to take smaller bites and it's going to take you longer to eat your meal. And stop when full. So it actually takes your body about 20 minutes to realize that you're full after a meal. So if you're eating really quickly and you only take 10 minutes to eat your meal, you're going to realize that you're not full after your meal, which means you'll probably go for seconds or eat a dessert. And then 20 minutes later, your body will say, oh my God, I had too much food. but it's too late at that point. So taking the full 20 minutes to eat and enjoy your meal. If it takes you a little bit less than that, that's okay. Just wait a little bit before you go for extra food or for dessert. So give your body time to actually digest and to feel like it's full before you make a decision on if you need more food or not. Tip number 5 would be more for like right now. So setting a routine. So a lot of people are out of their routine. There's no schedule. Some people are still in a good routine if they're working and life is almost normal. But for a lot of people, especially kids, there's no routine right now. So trying to get as much as possible. It won't be a full routine, but just some things that you can control. So an example would be starting your day with a balanced breakfast. Even if the day starts a little bit later, I know a lot of teenagers are sleeping in right now, so their day starts a little bit later. That's okay, just still starting the day with a balanced meal. And then going into your day. So if you skip that meal because you think, well, lunch is in a couple hours, so I'm just going to skip breakfast, the chances are that you're going to eat more at lunchtime. So you're going to be at the 1 to 2 on that hunger scale, and you might eat a bit more, or you might make some less than desirable decisions on what you're going to eat just because you're just too hungry at that point. So just eating a balanced meal when you start your day is a good way to start the day. No skipping meals. So try not to skip any meals. For same reason, when you get to the next meal, if you're too hungry, you're going to make not so great choices on what you're going to eat. You're probably going to have more cravings, especially if you add on emotions throughout the day. And you're just going to be so hungry that you're going to eat faster and eat more. And then have healthy snacks planned or prepped. That can be helpful for the kids. I know some people have even been doing some little lunch boxes for the kids. So kind of like if they were going to school or daycare, what they would bring with them, and just setting that out and saying, this is your snacks and meals or your snacks for the day. So when they're gone, they're gone. So eat them as you would when you were at school or daycare, just to keep it a little bit on the healthier side. Also just having fruits and veggies there available so you can snack on that if you need to snack a little bit more throughout the day, especially for kids. And the last tip is around emotional eating versus actual hunger. So knowing the difference between the two, or just being more conscious of the difference. So typically when you have an actual hunger, so physical hunger, you're going to get a sensation in your stomach of like an empty stomach, maybe even some growling in your stomach. That's usually a sign that you're actually physically hungry. Less energy or a bit of a hard time concentrating. So if you notice that your energy or your concentration goes down a few hours after a meal, that might mean it's time for a little boost of energy, so a snack or a meal. And then when you're really hungry, various foods will sound appealing. So if you're really actually hungry, if I give you a healthy, balanced meal, you will want to eat it. Whereas if it's more of a psychological hunger, so an emotion, and it's not physical hunger, typically that's going to be more of a spontaneous want of the food. So you're not really going to feel it physically. It's just going to be all of a sudden you want a certain thing. More of an emotional hunger rather than a physical hunger. So you might realize like you just had a meal and you were full, but something happened that triggered you to want a certain food. That's usually emotional. And also just wanting a certain thing. So instead of saying like, yeah, I will eat anything you give me right now, you're going to have a craving for a particular food. So craving chocolate, for example, or chips, or a certain food or food group that you know is probably more emotional than physical. So cravings can be triggered by situations. So conflicts, a stressful workday would be an example. Kids that are being stubborn or hard to handle, certain places. So sometimes when you visit certain people or you go to certain places, it triggers some cravings based off of what you've done in the past. Activities. So I have some clients that just sitting on the couch to watch TV triggers wanting to eat. And that's an emotional hunger, because if they just had supper, it would still happen. It's just because they've done it so many times, they've had food while watching TV, that they actually associate TV with food. And so they're going to get cravings or feel emotionally hungry. And emotions, so sadness, boredom, etc., are linked to also getting cravings. So a couple of recommendations, and this is great for kids as well, is making a couple lists. So first list is a list of distractions. So activities or hobbies that you enjoy doing, so that when you have some time, let's say you're bored, this is more for boredom, I guess, or just distracting you. But if you're feeling bored and you're wanting to eat something, but you know you're not actually hungry, it's just more of boredom, so it's emotional, going over your list and picking an activity that you can do in that moment and doing the activity. And the distraction typically will take the craving away. If you think you might also be hungry, it's a good time to have just a healthy snack to go with your distraction, just to tie you over to the next meal. Also a list of things that are comforting. That's more when you're feeling emotional. So if you're feeling sadness or you're looking for comfort and not necessarily a distraction at that point, things that are comforting could be calling a friend or family member that you enjoy talking to. It could be reading, taking a bath, going for a walk, going out in nature, whatever you feel is comforting to you. Make a list of those things. And whenever you feel that wanting to eat that's tied more to emotions, you can look at your list, pick something, and do that to start. You can do more than one thing on your list too. So that's really great to have in advance, because typically when we're in that moment and we have cravings, it's going to be a little bit harder for us to think about, okay, what else is comforting to me? You want that food. So having a list is a little bit easier, because you can actually just look at the list and pick something that seems appealing in that moment. So the list of distractions would be really great for kids right now, things that they'll enjoy doing. And that way, when they feel bored and they're bugging you, or they want food, but you know they're not really hungry, they're just bored, you can pull out their list or have them pull out their list and have them pick an activity that they want to do, that they have on there that they would enjoy. So that's all I had for you today. Just a few tips on being a little bit more mindful, especially in the situation that we're in with isolation. It's a really great time to start to practice that, and to just keep practicing moving forward, even when you go back to work, or more of a routine with kids in school or daycares later on. It's still good things to keep practicing throughout the day, and just to be more conscious and mindful of what you're eating. So my recommendation is take a few of the tips that you think you could start with, whether that's a journal, or the list of activities, or cleaning up your environment, or eating slower. So just having a few tips that you're going to start working on instead of doing everything at once, and focus on those things. And I really recommend getting the kids involved in this. It's a really great time, because as they get into schools, daycares, having more of a routine, they tend to stop listening to their hunger and fullness skills as well. So we learned it way back when we were children, for the most of us, because we're told when to eat typically, or to eat our full plate. So those are the types of things you want your kids to start working on as well at a young age. So for the kids, I would really recommend the experiment that we did at the beginning with the raisins, or the gummies, or chocolate, or something like that, getting them to really taste food and all the steps that go into eating mindfully. And then also having that list of distractions, activities that they can do when they're just bored, but they have nothing to do, so they're wanting to eat. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out, and I hope you'll have a great day.